Hello and most welcome to H777. Why isn't that an odd number? We have 3 sevens in a stroke. That's actually the most lucky combination in East Asia. There used to be a cigarette brand called 777, just because it's very good luck. I hope I have good luck today with today's lecture. It will be about what we found out in neurology, and this is their most recent discovery, and it's rather a breakthrough, one could say, and it's on the functioning of our system, and especially a specific part of our brain called the prefrontal lobe. The prefrontal lobe is situated in front of the brain. This is what we have inside our forehead. And very long, scientists thought it had no purpose at all. Actually, that went on for almost 60 years. And that was one of the reasons we had frontal lobotomy, because it wasn't an important part. They operated on it and made incisions there to sort of alleviated problems with schizophrenia and other diseases. Much later it turned out the prefrontal lobes do serve a purpose and important as such. But to understand the importance, we need to remake our model of the brain completely. We actually need to remodel the whole world, our picture of the world. And I think this is a very good hint that this is the first neurology that is actually compatible with quantum mechanics. The way it's perceived there, it's a bottom-up process. Bottom-up process in a way that it starts at the bottom and goes up, but it also goes from top to bottom. And as I mentioned before, these two models has been very common before in neurology, but this is a special one. It sees the prefrontal lobe as the executive factor and also our thinking capacity in action-wise, whereas the other part of the brain seemed to be a more stable or static view of the world that doesn't serve the purpose of any new thinking, any action, or at least not an action that is directed in sequence. So what we have is sequential thinking at the same time as we have from top to bottom. And each these could be called something like controlling function or cognitive controlling function. And the cognitive controlling function is me doing something like taking the lid off the pen and put a letter X on the whiteboard. And we know now this is separated. It's not connected to my directing thinking, and it sometimes can be triggered just by me holding a pen in my hand. And this is very similar to a most common thing among people who uses glasses. Sometimes they adjust the glasses, although the glasses are not on their head. The reason being, the things do not connect in the way we thought before. Actually, we never cared about what connects a thinking process, like pure conscious thinking process, and the actual action. So what we've been thinking before is that, for example, Kalle here is thinking, and I can acknowledge that, and he can even tell me about his thinking process, and then he do something. But there is nothing in between. I showed in 775. We haven't thought what is executing the whole thing. And now it turns out the executing power of the prefrontal lobe is actually what makes us unique in the mammalian world. It makes us incredibly agile and very skilled. So we can compare to a simpler animal. How about the squirrel? We have a couple of squirrels in the garden and they steal sunflower seeds, and sometimes they possibly turn the little sunflower house topsy-turvy so it falls to the ground. A squirrel sees food and grabs food. It's an easier connection. They don't have a controlling function. They eat when they see the food. And the lower down you get on the scale of animals, the more is the connection between perceiving and eating. And there is a reason higher mammals try to create a distance between direct action and thinking or perceiving. And the reason is you can start to plan. Animals cannot plan, they just act directly. So isn't this fascinating? The area of the human brain that we thought most useless is actually the most humane part of the brain. That makes us unique in contrast to other animals. And the reason is, in some obvious sense, we have a controlling function, or controlling functions. Should be a plural there. And this is what is called cognitive steering function. And those have to be developed. And this is one of the reasons cognitive function is more important than what we actually know. Because these are the ones who actually perform new thinking and action. And those things are more important than any knowledge, because otherwise nothing new will happen. Actually, nothing will happen. And this is what happened with those poor patients that were lobotomized from the year 1945 to 1974, I think, here in Sweden. The figure around 4,500 were lobotomized. And they are incapable of controlling their functions. So if you give a pen to them, they're going to stop writing directly. And that goes against the grain, because if I see Kalle, I give him a pen and he starts to write something, I think he's conscious. I think somewhere he's been thinking. No, it's not necessarily so. And I would try to find a link over the internet. Is this rather elegant lady who suffers so bad from Alzheimer she can't even see. She's completely gone. And this is filmed a few days before she passes away. But she was a ballet dancer all her life. They put the music to the Swan Lake on, ballet. And what happens? She's starting to do the ballet. Everything is one singular cognitive function. She does it elegantly, but there is not a single hint of conscious control. She's not conscious at all. One can clearly see that in her eyes, but there's nothing lacking in her movement. They are completely perfect. And this is actually something I listened to many years ago. It was a recording of a young girl. She could have been something like 16 or 17. She didn't do any action like this ballet dancer, but she was talking, and we couldn't see her because it was just a tape recording. But what she described was going to the bank, taking a piece of paper, signing the paper, writing an amount, make a withdrawal taking the money out and leaving the bank. And she used a lot of complicated words as well, like bank account, withdrawal, debit, credit, steering, all those things that connected to banks. So her vocabulary was quite extensive. And then the teacher asked us, what do you think about this lady? What sort of person was this person? Well, I'd say maybe she's working at the bank. She knows all these expressions. And she's talking about something she's going to do. She's going to make a withdrawal of some sort. And then the teacher said, no, you're not right at all. And then we could see a video of this young girl, young woman, 16 or 17 years old. She could not even move. She was severely mentally retarded. But she still has some capacity in this part of the brain, knowledge. She knew things. So when she was tested, she could talk about them and she could put them into the correct context. And she was like a, how do you say, a sponge by sucking up knowledge. She heard one thing there, she heard one thing there, and she loved complicated technical terms. And she had an uncanny sense of putting these words together in a correct way, almost correct, but very, it was very convincing. And I remember I was utterly shocked when I saw her. She was so retarded she couldn't take care of herself even. She wasn't the, maybe the teacher said she could have an IQ of 65 to 70, somewhere in that region. So it's very severely mentally retarded. Someone who can never live an independent life. She couldn't even feed herself properly. And that goes to show that you can have a lot of knowledge and you can register knowledge, but you don't know how to execute that. And this is what we mean by being an able person, a skilled person. And I think within a few years we will change the IQ system completely. And we will go over to look at what it is to do actual thinking, instead of asking people just to repeat something, which is not a measure of anything. And as you can hear, this goes hand in hand what we discussed earlier. The failure of the education system, why we don't learn anything more, why most things that we hear sounds just like platitudes. It doesn't contain anything. It's shallow, it's vacuous. Maybe you can go even further and make parallels into philosophy and say modern life is meaningless. We don't grow as human beings. We don't learn better how to take care of ourselves. We don't learn how to be with others. All this fits like hand into the glove with the new system that, amongst others, David Bardrea puts up. So what do we have instead? And I think this is going to make my colleague extensively happy. Well, we have a training of functions. And one very, very important function is the controlling function. The controlling function you train by learning by rote, for instance. That's one good way. And you do it over and over and over and over again. And every time you do it, you strengthen this capacity of regulating the knowledge. Otherwise, the knowledge can be had with a person with his IQ. It doesn't demand anything of intelligence. And I'm afraid the current education system could actually be managed by people like this. And that's a horrid thought, but the reason being we haven't understood what is in between. And here the skill is. Here is every good part. And this is what people used to have. Otherwise, how do you explain all the wonders that people used to be able to do and nobody can do anymore? I was thinking about the Renaissance. when you found these skilled people on all levels. People who were doing shoes, people who were doing carpentry, amazing things, just amazing, mind-blowing, without any instruments. Well, what we have today is a system that is so fine-tuned as to human beings can exist in that system, and the system gives the triggers. So we don't have to develop them. So think about this girl. She can live with her family, she can be fed. She doesn't have to be self-supportive. And that's a little bit modern man. We have every trigger around us, so we don't have to trigger ourselves. We don't need controlling function in one way. And that's also the reason why we're not developing them. Because if you didn't know root learning in the Middle Ages, you'd be lost. Because you need these skills. You don't need that skill per se. You don't need to repeat liturgy or know, like my granny, the catechism. What you need is the function, and that is learned by root learning. It's not the contents. Probably somebody from the modern educational system will look at, hey, it's the same contents. What do you learn by that? It's useless learning. It's not useless learning. According to David Barry, it's the most important over everything. It's the very most important. And we take our modern society as a sign we are being intelligent. We don't have to be intelligent anymore. Actually, we stop developing these higher resources. And we are sinking down to the level of the squirrel. Why? Why is that? Well, the squirrel, its habitat, it's complicated, and he simplifies it as much as he can. But our habitat is even more simple. It's extremely simple. Everything is ready-made. I just have to walk into this room and there's chairs, there's tables, there's heating. I don't have to look for food. I go to the supermarket. I don't even have to check my health. I just go to the hospital or some doctor. I have health insurance. I have heating at home. Everything is arranged. Even the schooling system is in itself regulated. So you don't need to control much. And although this sounds like a fantastic thing to have, that's what the defenders of the social welfare system would say. It's horrible when it comes to the development of yourself. And what happens in the end? You lose consciousness. You slowly lose your ability to feel, to be conscious, to lead your action. And you become something even lower than the squirrel. And we notice people, if you take them out of this safe environment, well, it's not so much safe, but rather it's, you could say the intelligence is in the environment. If you take them out of this intelligent environment, everything is ready-made, and you can get triggered by the environment, a little bit like this girl or the dancing ballet lady, which is very beautiful. You have to see that one. It's quite fantastic. If you take people out of this intelligent, safe haven and put them in some other environment, an environment that maybe the Renaissance man or the medieval man wouldn't have a problem with, we collapse. We collapse completely because we lost our intelligence. So you see here, dear Kalle, you who wanted to have some good proof of root learning, here is a bit more than you asked for. Here is the actual core of thinking comes from that. This is the very most important thing. I think I put too many adjectives there, too many superlatives. But I can't press this enough. This is rather amazing. And of course, it requires a completely different type of thinking. A type of thinking that you consciously put you out of safe haven, because that's the only place you can develop these skills. And of course, you can't do it all by once. You can't do as in the TV series Robinson. You can't go to a deserted island and hope to survive. No, it takes some acclimatization. These areas are today severely underdeveloped. If you compare to people who are living in less intelligent environments like the Amazon or similar, those areas are actually more developed than ours is. It should be exactly the opposite, because we have much more of these lower things. My repertoire of different things I can do, both when it comes to doing things with my hands, feet and body, are much more complicated than the Amazon man. But even more so when it comes to the internalized things that started from the hand and gone into my hand, how I regulate my own thinking. And here it becomes even more interesting, because we know memory, for instance, perception needs to be regulated, and perception and memory comes in a lot of small of these boxes or circles, you can call them whatever. So there will for each person be specific boxes to take out a specific word in some specific grammar, maybe in some weird language, Tagalog in Philippines or something like that. And you have to learn a new cognitive function for each of these. So you see, the opportunities are endless. And the more you train this, the more you take responsibility of your own knowledge sphere, the more skilled you get. But if you leave everything to passivity, it won't develop. It's going to be jumbled. It's not going to be ordered. It is like we human beings have one single intention. This is the feeling I get from reading David Bader. And this intention we mentioned many times before. It could be the prana, it could be the direction Alexander speaks of. And oddly enough, and this is most interesting, they use almost the same term. Of course, that's an happenstance, but it's still interesting. This is what Alexander would call conscious control. And this, I would say, makes it much more accessible to modern man. And Alexander is known to be very hard to understand, and one of the reasons is it doesn't make much sense in the old model, because we don't need conscious control in the old model. We skipped this middle part here. How do we develop action? And action means both on the outside. If Kalle asks me put those papers together, I will have to use conscious control to do maybe 2-3 boxes. One box concerns my folding this. Another box could be piling. And third one could be taking those things together. But listen now, that is also happening internally. When I sit down and I try to take out some memory that is important for what I'm going to say, like right now. Maybe I want to mention something else. Then the more I develop a specific cognitive steering function or cognitive function, I will be more able to bring that specific thing into the open, into my speaking organs, so I can put it here. Otherwise, it would be just blank. And of course, you know many people who has a knowledge that is just incredible. It could be extensive. But in an actual discussion, in actual thinking, you get the feeling they're not so skilled in bringing exactly that knowledge up into the air when it's pertinent, when it actually matters. So another critique of the modern educational system. What we do today, we give the students a lot of different information, but we don't care about developing the skills to put that information in just the right moment in your thinking process so you can use it right then and there. And this is one of the reasons why things are getting lost today. The 9 years or 8 years you spend in primary often is lost 6 or 7 years later. And the reason is you don't put it into practice. We do not acknowledge this part. So you don't learn how to put it into action. And on top of that, you don't learn new things. You don't learn new skills of acquiring new information from the world and then learning how to handle them. So in the end, you could possibly get an enormous amount of skill boxes or whatever you call them, and you can also develop even higher functions. And this is most interesting. You could call this as a hierarchical system of guidance. So let me give you an example here. I could be a businessman. For instance, I'm selling pens, to make it simple. I have different organizations for how I sell my pens. I have another system for what demand there is for certain pens. Right now, maybe the Violet is very popular, and it should be Pentel or Pilot, one of the better brands. That's one thing. It's on the medium level. But then I need a higher level. How do I make a profit in the long run? And that could be a cognitive function that makes different decisions. It could be even a cognitive function that makes the decision not to sell pens anymore. Can you see that's a higher purpose? I want to keep my business. This higher purpose is not dependent on selling pens only. Could sell pens, but it's not dependent on that because it's on a higher scale. And just let me exemplify, it could be an even higher scale. You can have a cognitive function up here, that thinks about your life in a moral standpoint. I want to help other people. So I can use the money for my business to do something else, maybe help people with learning problems, something like that.
Squirrels.
Yes, you can have squirrels. But the thing is, they can get higher and higher, and you see that's a big purpose as well. So that's good for so many reasons. Many people, and this is true, many people get stuck in selling only pens. So their shop or their business break. And this is exactly what David Barder found amongst those people who had like a partial hemorrhage or tumor in the frontal lobes. They lost part of their skill, but they usually lost the higher part. So they were stuck maybe in one aspect of their work and couldn't change it. They couldn't see it as work as such. I need work, I can work with something else. That became less and less possible the more of the brain tissue that disappeared. And I told you earlier about this Mrs. Primrose, no? Yeah, Primrose, who could not even make a proper meal in her kitchen. And that's a very severe loss. All of her frontal lobe was gone. But that's the severest loss. That's very uncommon. She was the sister of one of those people who had the sort of first insight into this business. That is quite unusual. I think it had to be that unusual for people to put their eyesight on these specific problems. And it's very interesting. Her own neurologist and her surgeon and her personal doctor None of these three people noticed any problem with her. It was just this brother, who was also a doctor, who noticed that was a problem. Because these problems, even if they are so incredibly severe, as in this case, they don't get noticed. Not on the sick bed, not walking around, maybe not even in social life, because the triggers are all around. If somebody comes to you and put your hands, for a hello, you're going to put your hand as well. You don't need to make a decision. Maybe you need a decision-making thing not to do it. See, these can also say not. That's very important to understand. They don't just say yes, they could say no. Actually, you can model these things in different aspects when just getting into it. It's common to have two different types, one that says no and one that say yes, and it could be more important to say no. And we all know people who are, what we say in Swedish, gränslösa, and there are people who can't stop their behavior. So although they might look normal on a very circumspectual inspection, they will not be in the long run. Their goals in lives won't be delivered, and sometimes not even their short-term goals. And I think this is a very good explainer to the short-term memory we have today. When I say short-term memory, most of the projects that society does today, and most of the projects of singular human beings, are very short-term. It used to be incredibly long-term. We used to put centuries and centuries. Yeah, yes.
So this lady, this disabled lady.
Primrose, yeah.
No, the second that you mentioned today, with EQ from 65 to 70, yes. who was disabled, and she had memorized information about the bank, so she knew all these difficult words. So she had memorized these things, and she could put them in context. Mm-hmm. But say now that she had learned them by heart, word by word.
But she had.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Yes. Okay. So okay. Yes. But wouldn't she be? But her intelligence has not improved. So even.
I understand your question.
So what is the problem?
Yes, she doesn't repeat them. That's the problem. Mm-hmm. She doesn't repeat them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's what this is about. It's not about knowledge. Uh-huh. It's about repeating them. Mm-hmm. And she doesn't repeat them. She knows them. Mm-hmm. That's not enough. It needs to be repeated. And it's a very, very good question. Thank you for that one. If it was a teacher here, he or she would say the same thing, but she already knows those things. She doesn't need more knowledge. It's the actual repetition beyond you knowing it. And that's the daily repetition. Daily repetition. And of course she won't do that. She also already know those words. And the daily repetition most probably has to be very disciplined as well. You need to put your whole concentration to that by shaping one of these cognitive steering functions separately. So they need to be trained separately, not in context, not while I'm talking to you or doing something. It needs to be in a separate part of my head. I can actually do it now as a separate business. I have my verbal thing myself, 33 things from De Bono, and I do it now, and I'm talking to you. It's just because I train them for 2-3 years, something like that. Once you can do it, you put them together in action. And this also explains how human beings can do many things at the same time. And this is not exactly what we were talking about earlier in neurology. We talked about simultaneous capacity, like drinking a cup of coffee, writing something down, and listening to the radio something about the weather tomorrow. No, it's not that. Simultaneous things is we can keep many things going at the same time because these are separated. That's the interesting part. We haven't realized before they are actually separated. And you can build as many as you want. And you can keep them going at the same time. It doesn't mean that you have to sort of divide your attention because they work anyway. It's not the same thing as you driving a car and try to, God forbid, try to send a text message. That's not what I'm talking about. That is the actual simultaneous, spontaneous attention in this moment. Now these things, they go over hours, days, years, I'd say. And that means that we can simultaneously acquire different skill at the same time. And this is something that separates us so clearly from the animals. Animals can't do that at all. They are already stuck in the behavior of seeing something. So you have to give me a piece of bread here almost. I see something, I'm a squirrel or I'm a monkey, and I eat it directly. And this is good in itself. I need the food and everything, but it's much better to have this control, because then I can sort of first, maybe as a primitive man, make some sort of planning. I can store food. I don't have to eat it right now. And then that could be transferred into maybe some of my tribesmen. Let's call him, what could be a good name? Calix or something like that. I don't like her and I wanted her to get rid of the tribe. And I don't do that directly. Animals do that directly. Look at dogs. If they don't like somebody in the tribe, they're going to bite that dog directly. But human beings, because of this specific system, which is uniquely human, we can wait until another moment and do that. And this is something already the Neolithic man was able to some extent to do. And this was sharpened as time went by. And in a way, when we got civilized, when we started to have cities and all that, it's about 10,000 years ago, all these things started to develop even more. We got more and more of these squares, and we were able to do more and more things parallel. And we can also split them. And there are stories from the Sumerians, people are waiting like 5 years to do a revenge. But it could also be other things. One of the earliest Sumerian kings, he built up his empire on peace. That also takes planning. Because if somebody aggravates you on the frontier, your instinctual thing is just like the squirrel, attack directly. So you see here, we can make the distance between thinking and action longer and longer and longer. But if we want to, we can act directly also. So we can do both things. We can do the animal things, we can act directly when that is suitable. I think maybe I've been able now to sort of image a picture where human beings are uniquely capable of doing a planning that's just unfathomable, even when it comes to like a chimpanzee or something. And that is one of the reasons human beings is so extraordinarily advanced. Nothing similar at all to all the other species. And this unique capability is something we not acknowledge. I think that's one of the reasons when I read at least the biology when I was young, I looked at an ape and the teacher said, "Oh, do you know how big is the difference between an ape and you?" Well, it's only 2%. I don't remember the figure. It was very measly. And then we all got stunned and thought, "Oh my God, I'm only a monkey." It was shaved somewhere here and there, but I didn't manage to shave it correctly today. I think we can sigh and think we are very different from the apes. Yeah,
So, okay, so to make it clear, so at university, for instance, when you study for an exam, you can read a book 2 or 3 times. So we could say that we know the book.
Yeah,
Or
then you get this area just like the lady. You have knowledge, and if you are put to test, you can answer correctly. And you can have conversation about this knowledge. And you can think about it yourself as well.
So okay, and this disabled lady from today and the other lady from yesterday, from a lecture of yesterday.
That's Primrose.
So these people are not. If you would go to them, Primrose, if you could go to them and you would say, please repeat this today and tomorrow, for instance, cooking food in the right order.
Yeah.
Are they unable to do so? Would you not improve the intelligence? Are they unable to do that, or what is the?
No, they wouldn't even be able to repeat it in the right order. They don't have order as such.
They don't have order as such.
No, they don't have order as such. This is ordering. This is actually ordering.
But they can put things in context, so it's a kind of order.
No, that's automatic.
Automatic. Okay,
it's
okay,
built
okay.
in here. It needs triggers. So you have. It's also a very good question. Let's start with the young girl, the one who was very retarded. I don't know if that's a proper term to say retarded, but I think it is. Because that severe retardation. She says one sentence, it's here, sentence 1, walking to the bank. The second sentence could be filling out a paper. The third sentence could be making a withdrawal. This sentence will trigger this sentence will trigger that sentence, this sentence will trigger that sentence. It's not a sequencing, they're triggering each other. And the idea of learning by heart is you make yourself free from the sequencing. What you do is you develop one of these. And this is unknown until 1 year ago almost. We didn't know these things existed. But now when he's looking more to action, how do we think and how do we act in the normal life? It makes an enormous difference, enormous. And we can develop our thinking skills to hone them so they can be extraordinary. There's actually no limit. And nothing excludes anything else. I can, so to speak, hone and make this lecture series better and better, but at the same time, I can develop something even more long-term. My morality is just one idea that popped into my mind. Torbjörn Tänge would not like these ideas, what they saw here. For him, it's just more or less like the squirrel. You see something nice and you eat it directly. Yeah, it's based on that. He admits it. It's as simple as that. And basically, what we've done within science, involuntarily, I'd have to say, this is not intentionally, but we dehumanized man. Non-intentional. Nobody wanted this to happen. But because we didn't know better about this function, what could we do? Also, our measures weren't correct, but it's nothing that could have told us that. We needed that knowledge. So knowledge doesn't cease to be important. This is not what I'm saying. But that knowledge needs to be controlled to become even better. Even better. And I would say this could actually be a starting point. Something well beyond, but this is not bad what he done. I am incredibly impressed. And it's a lot for me to digest. I'd say that I'm not a neurologist, and many other things he's writing is the very, very latest of the latest. It's just incredible when it comes to that. But I can see how this opens up a lot. And humans are not going to be dehumanized anymore. Not intentional, nothing like that, but when we start to understand that, I am 100% sure this is going to change the educational system in its foundation completely. Because it was a knowledge model that actually enforced the changes we made the last 70, 80, even 100 years back. And that idea did not contain an executive function. I'd say, oh, I'm exhausted now, but it was great. I say thank you very much. And once I sort of, how do you say, metabolize a little about the information David Barger gave to me, I'll get back to this most interesting subject. But this is incredibly promising. And I haven't even mentioned how this neurology is actually compatible with quantum mechanics, because that would blow me up today, and Kalle had to drive me to the hospital, God forbid. Now it's a relaxing last lecture. Okay, let's take it easy out there, be careful, and I say good afternoon.
Thank you.